Mayor Sherelle Parker just signed a new law targeted at reducing shootings in the city, and it's believed to be the first in the nation. This new law requires gun shops to post a bright orange sign in their stores as a deterrent of anyone buying a gun for someone who can't legally own one, a practice known as straw purchasing. Mensa Dean, staff writer at The Trace, is here to break down why this is rampant in Philly and the legal vulnerabilities at play. It's Wednesday, September 24th. I'm Trinae Ree, and we're talking about the politics of preventing gun crime. Mensa, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I just briefly gave an overview of what straw purchasing is, but what are some reasons people are legally unable to purchase a gun for themselves?
There's a handful of reasons why a person couldn't buy a gun on their own. The first and foremost is probably the most common is that they have a criminal conviction. They have a felony conviction, which would bar them in just about every state, if not all states, from being able to buy a gun. Also, if a person has been diagnosed with certain mental illnesses, if a person is underage, you have to be 18 to buy a gun. There's some other things like if you're known to be a drunkard, just who determines who's a drunk. I guess that's on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, the big reasons why someone can't buy a gun is they have a criminal conviction, they're underage, they have a mental health diagnosis.
Okay, so now these bright orange signs are being placed in stores to warn people of the legal dangers of buying a gun for someone who can't have one. So how is this rollout going with these gun shops posting these warning signs?
Mayor Parker just signed this law in early September. The police commissioner, Kevin Bethel, said that it shouldn't be too complicated because there's only 7 gun shops in Philadelphia that the police department is now required to get signage to. There'll be a handful of signs in the stores. Exactly when the signs show up, not sure. I did visit 2 of the shops to get their reaction about the new law, but they didn't want to discuss it. And then I called 2 other shops, and they also had no comment. Most people wouldn't know where to find a gun shop if they weren't looking for a gun. These are places that kind of do their business very quietly in just tucked away places. Because of my job, I do seek them out from time to time, like I did for this story. And what I have found is they are not very open to talking to the press. They like to keep their heads down. The owner of one shop, he was very pointed towards me and said, "We don't talk to the press because the press is always twisting our words and what have you." And just to be fair, City Council, which of course drew up the legislation and passed it for the mayor to sign it, they didn't reach out to the gun shops in their fact-finding when they were writing this legislation and shepherding it through City Council. And the sponsor of the legislation, City Councilman Curtis Jones, said as much. They didn't reach out to them because they haven't had a good relationship with gun shops in previous efforts. So, yeah, it seems like just as someone who writes about government and writes about life in Philadelphia, it seems like there's not a lot of communication going on between our city government and gun shops.
There's tension there.
Yeah, that's the word. There's tension there. But anyway, the law is now in place and the signs will be arriving soon.
Gotcha. So 7 gun shops in the city. What are some of the consequences if you get caught with making a straw purchase? Are there more consequences if the straw purchased gun is used in a crime?
Right now, you can get up to a decade in prison for straw purchasing a gun. And in federal court, if that gun is used in certain crimes like terrorism, for example, you can get up to 25 years in prison. And there's also monetary fines that will go along with those. But yeah, this is a serious crime, and it has been a crime for a very long time. What the new law does is make stores post signage telling the public this is a crime. It may be hard to believe, but some people do not know that they cannot just buy a gun for somebody and give it to them if that person is prohibited from having a gun. So oftentimes when people get arrested, they cry ignorance of the law. This is an effort to try to clear up that ignorance cloud with regard to gun purchasing.
Why this law now, Mensa, when the city, along with other cities across the country, they're seeing homicides and shootings decline? I'm wondering if a sign is necessary or even effective in any matter.
Well, Mayor Parker explained at the bill signing ceremony that this is the part of their fight against gun violence. This is just one of the many things they're doing. They've also banned ghost guns in the city. They've banned switches, devices that allow guns to fire like automatic weapons. So this is just one of the things they're doing to try to throw a drag net around the problem of gun violence. It's not the intent to eradicate the problem just with this legislation, but this legislation it helps to get the message out, and therefore it helps to reduce the number of guns that are bought and then passed on to people who shouldn't have them.
We've got more on this story after the break.
Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I'm learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's conversation-based technique quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I've been practicing my Spanish with Babbel's AI conversation partner. I can choose my conversation topic and have a real-time dialogue. It's great at helping me think on my feet, and it's improving my pronunciation. Also, it's really easy to do anytime on my phone using Babbel's excellent mobile app. It's just one of the many fantastic Babbel tools for learning. Plus, Babbel has a real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations, all of which make it really easy to stay motivated to learn. I want you to learn another language. So CityCast is teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Let's get into some of the politics of this. The other element to all of this is that here in the Commonwealth in Pennsylvania, there's a law, a preemptive law, which forbids cities from regulating the ownership, possession, transfer, or transportation of firearms, ammunition, or ammunition components. So, Mensa, what does this state law mean when up against a city law? Is the new city law legal?
Well, there's been no lawsuits yet, so it's legal. The city has faced legal challenges in the past. About 5 years ago, they had a law requiring people to report their lost or stolen guns. That law was overturned because of the state's law that gives the state the right to make laws pertaining to gun ownership. However, since then, the city, like I said, has passed some laws pertaining to guns that have withstood legal challenge. One of those being the ghost gun ban. Now, there may be some legal issues still, some legal challenges that have yet to be resolved with that. But the city people had said, listen, if someone sues us, we'll see them in court. At the moment, the law pertaining to signs and gun shops warning people not to straw purchase, it's on the books, it's law, it's legal. If it's challenged, then the city will have to deal with that at that time.
It seems like it's good politics for city politicians to be aggressive on guns, but bad politics for state lawmakers who want to work in a much more divided political landscape. There are big portions of the state where people don't want restrictions on gun ownership. So that makes it more challenging to get gun laws through the legislature. Can you explain that tension?
Philadelphia is a Democratic city. It has been for generations now. Much of Pennsylvania it leans more red, more Republican. Part of the ideology of the Republican Party of today is that the Second Amendment is sacred. It should not be watered down in any way. And in Philadelphia, many people want guns to be regulated in a common sense type of way. We have the most gun violence of any place in the state. So the needs of Philadelphians, the wants, the desires are different when it comes to guns than other parts of the state. In other parts of the state, people have guns to hunt. Well, there's no hunting in Philadelphia. There's no place that's zoned for hunting here. And what happens here so often is guns are used to shoot people. And so there's a greater need for gun regulation here than there is out in part of the states where they still have bears roaming and elk and antelope. It's an ideological type of divide. It's a cultural divide with regard to guns. And so it's a tough sell to reform guns or to restrict guns outside of Philadelphia. So Mayor Parker and before her, Kenny, they've made some headway. They have made headway in getting some things into law to try to tamp down on guns flying through the streets unfettered. This is just another approach, another in that vein to try to do what they can do with regard to gun safety, gun reform in a state where there's so much pushback.
Mensah, what also seems alarming are the women here in Philadelphia who get swept up into all of this out of obligation to family members or even lovers. I read a story that you wrote back in July about how more women are getting swept up in these straw purchasing situations. Can you just briefly tell me what's going on here?
Yeah, I was at an anti-violence function. I met a lady from an organization called Why Not Prosper, which is a group that's been in Philadelphia for years, advocating for women coming out of prison, trying to get them back on their feet. They have some temporary housing for women as they come back into the community. And one of the programs that they run is an anti-straw purchasing campaign. The campaign is known as You Need to Know, N-O. And you need to know that purchasing guns for people who can't buy them for themselves legally is a crime. And they got a grant from some governmental sources, and they have a goal of reaching 10,000 people this year as they make the rounds in the community, their employees, and going to forums in school to inform people about the dangers and the consequences of straw purchasing. And at the time that I wrote the article, I guess it was in July, they had over 3,000 contacts. So they're looking to reach 10,000 people. They give them pledge cards and literature about what straw purchasing is, why they shouldn't do it, and the consequences if they do straw purchase and get caught. And so that intrigued me as someone who writes about guns and gun violence, that the problem that there are people in the grassroots who are working to educate people. It's not always just from the top down, the city or the state, but there's organizations like Why Not Prosper. And there was another organization in Philadelphia, too, Mothers in Charge, who had a similar campaign about 3 or 4 years ago. And they're, in fact, going to restart a campaign of public awareness, trying to reach women, I was told by the founder of that organization, Mothers in Charge. So, yeah, this is an issue that is well known. The police know about it, the DA and the people and the communities know that it's a problem, people buying guns. And a lot of those people happen to be women. Women, oftentimes, they don't have the criminal records, so they can go into a gun shop and buy a gun and hand it right over to the male in their lives, boyfriend, husband, whoever.
How big is the issue among women here in Philadelphia?
Well, the stats show that about 24% of all the people arrested for straw purchasing are women. Okay, and it's significant because women only account for a little more than 10% of the people arrested for gun crimes. So they're disproportionately represented for the crime of straw purchasing. And that number is going up. So it's quite alarming when you think about it. 24% of the people who buy guns and pass them on for profit or for love or for whatever are women.
So, Mensah, is the city moving in the right direction with this new warning sign, these bright orange signs? Or do city leaders and anti-violence advocates that you speak with, like Reverend Michelle Simmons of Why Not Prosper and Mothers in Charge, do they need to come together and draw up some new ideas?
With this new law requiring gun shops to put signs in their store warning people about straw purchasing, the city claims they're the first city to ever do this. That's moving in the right direction. They're in front, the leader of the pack with regard to doing something like this. So it can't hurt letting people know that you can get yourself in a lot of trouble by doing this. This is something that is like, you're not going to get too much pushback in the city.
Mensah Dean, staff writer at The Trace, thank you so much for breaking this all down with me on CityCast Philly today.
Thank you again for having me. Appreciate it.
You can read Mensah's reporting by clicking the links in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode and share this with a friend. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.